Okay, hello everyone. So you guys face to face might have seen me here the first week, but oh, I have to take myself. Sorry, but my name is Lauren Okine, and I'm a senior at Dakota Valley. Um, okay, I've been working with Minogue for like over a year, and this is my first time teaching an ACT class. So please bear with me, and if you have any questions or I'm talking too fast or anything like that, or I need to explain something better, just let me know. So I'll try and improve on that. Um, okay, so we're gonna be working on English today, and English is actually my favorite. English is my favorite section on the ACT, and I think that's because I feel like you can better prepare for it than some other sections. Because once we get like the grammar rules down and everything like that, then you'll basically be set for this test. You just need to know like the format. And if you do a ton of practice tests, you kind of like know what to expect, which is what I like about it. And then also I just really like reading, so that's why English is my favorite. So to start, okay, so because it's my first week of class and teaching, I just want to go over like a few basic things just about the ACT and ACT class. Maddie or Minogue might have gone over them with you, but basically like some things that'll help you when we're doing or when we're taking this class is to like try and write down what I put on the board like for your notes and stuff. And then also try and get the homework done because the homework has like sections you can read that'll give you more tips about the ACT, and then also lots of practice tests for you to take. And when you take those practice tests, you'll be better prepared for the actual ACT because like the more practice you have, the better you'll be and more prepared you'll be. The other thing is come to class prepared. I know Minogue always says like bring your calculator and all that stuff. So try and have like a notebook to take notes and like a pencil. And then yeah, so ask me questions if you have any because like that makes class more engaging. And then it's also like not just me like talking at you guys. So yeah, I think that was basically it. Oh yeah, and like asking questions doesn't make you sound dumb. I just said like I don't want to be talking at you guys the whole time. So if you like ask me questions, I can like answer and we'll just all be talking together. And then how to do the homework. It's kind of like self-explanatory. You guys have probably all had homework before. Just like take the practice test or read the section. When you are like checking your practice test answers, the answers should be in the back of the book for all of your books. And then go and try and like correct your mistakes and see what you did wrong, see if you can understand it. And then you can ask me questions the next week or the next time we meet. Or you can also text Minogue. I think his number is in the group meet. So if you have any questions, you can just hold them for next class or then text Minogue. Okay. Okay. So any questions so far for me? No? Okay, so then we'll just get started on the English part. Okay, so first we're going to talk about like the English basics, just like a breakdown of the English test. Okay, so if you've never taken an ACT English test before, it is 45 minutes. That's how much time they give you. You have 5 passages to read. So if you did the math, that would break down to 9 minutes per passage. The other thing is there are 75 questions total. So that like may seem like a lot, but once you're taking the test, like they go by so quick. You can answer some of them like in 2 seconds. And then, yeah, so if we did the math with that, there's 15 questions per passage. And then to break it down even further, that's like 36 seconds per question. Okay, so when you are taking the ACT English test, the most important thing to remember is to use your rules first. So that's referring to the grammar rules we're going to talk about. And then use like your gut feeling or your gut instinct second. So when you're taking the test, try and remember like the common rules we're going to talk about, or like with adverbs and adjectives. And then if you're still not sure, choose the one that you feel like works best. Okay, so more about the English test is that it's written at a 9th grade level. And so they do not test you on spelling, vocab, or the Oxford comma. So, you guys know what the Oxford comma is? Yeah? Does anyone have a question about it? I'll still show an example. So let's say I have a sentence and I want to end it with like dogs, cats, and bears. So this comma in my list right before the word and is the Oxford comma. And so basically like, people disagree on whether we're going to use the comma or not. I like using it. I always use it, so I did there. But if I were to take out the comma, the sentence would still be correct. Dogs, cats, and bears. And then, yeah, so I was just explaining it, but we are not tested on it on the ACT, so you don't need to worry about it or if it was kind of confusing. But then let me tell you what we are tested on. So we're tested on punctuation, grammar, style, usage, and organization. And so we're going to go over all of those throughout the coming weeks. Okay. Does everyone have this down? Over here? So I guess like the most important rule when taking an English test is that less is more. So a lot of times they'll give you questions that are super wordy, but the ACT is testing you on like your ability to be concise. So if I had an example, so here's my example sentence. The food was tasty, delicious, and amazing. So do you guys see like what's wrong with that? Yeah, basically all these words mean the same thing. So you could cut out delicious and amazing and just say the food was tasty, because all three words mean the same thing, and you don't, to include them all would be redundant. That's what they say a lot on the ACT. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna switch to purple because I like this marker better. But now we're gonna talk about order. So when you're taking like an ACT English practice test, make sure and try to do the easiest questions first. I think I'll switch back to the okay. try and do the easiest questions first because they're worth just the same amount as the hard questions. If you spend all your time trying to answer the question and you still don't really know it, that's wasting time that you could have been getting more points. And then another thing is that try and answer every single question. Because if you leave like a ton, like 10 questions blank, that's 10 questions that you have no chance of getting correct. If you So if you had like 1 minute left and you still have like 5 to go and you're like, I can't get to all these in time, just try and like bubble in and answer, because if you at least have something bubbled in, there's a 25% chance you got it right, because there's 4 options. Okay, last thing, I'm not gonna write it down, and I think Maddie may have mentioned it, but if you don't know, actually I'll write it, okay. Okay, so if you don't know the answer to a question, at least bubble in an answer and then come back to it. What I like to do is like make a big star on it so I know that I need to come back to that question. And so if you don't bubble in like an answer choice, you might be on 13 but you skipped it and you answer 14 and then you bubble it in where 13 is supposed to go. That could mess up all your answers for the whole entire test. So you could lose a lot of points there. So that's why this tip is to bubble in an answer and then come back to it. So you can change it to whichever one you think is correct when you have the time. Okay, so a few more things before we get to the actual grammar rules. I'm going to talk about pacing. So the thing they say when taking an English ACT test is to like read like an editor. So you're going to be like reviewing, editing, or like rewriting the passages they give you. Another thing is to read every single answer choice. And this is even if you think you have the right answer. So you could be reading and you're like, oh, choice B is absolutely correct. And you don't read the rest, you move on to the next question. But if you had read like answer choice D, you would have seen that it was a better option. Maybe it would have fit better into the sentence. So make sure to read every single answer so that you can choose the best one. A lot of times on the ACT, there might be some where you're like, oh, none of these are correct. But the ACT is really about choosing the best option, the one that's the most right. And then another thing I think may have been already mentioned, but if an answer choice is like partly wrong, it's completely wrong. Okay, sorry. If an answer choice is partly wrong, it's completely wrong. There's no chance it's going to be correct if like part of that answer is wrong. Okay, and then the last thing is, like, don't make stupid mistakes because you were rushing yourself. So the goal is not to finish the test in 30 minutes. It would be better if you took it and you didn't get to finish. Maybe you had like a couple left, but you took your time and you made sure you were choosing the best answer choice. So don't rush, but you do have a time constraint, so you still have to make sure you're not like looking off into space and stuff. But don't rush and try to make sure you're choosing the best answer choice. Okay, last thing I'm going to talk about with this English breakdown is intuition. And I kind of mentioned it earlier, but like using your gut feeling. so along with that, if an answer choice sounds wrong, it probably is wrong. Alright, so like I said, if it sounds wrong, it probably is wrong, and make sure you're plugging in each answer choice. It really helped me to like plug the answer choice into the passage and see how it would read. I'm not sure if this is like the best advice, but I would kind of like read it out loud under my breath because I like hearing it, and so that would help me to know which one sounds correct and which was the best option to choose. And then the last thing with intuition is to watch out for conversational English. So one example would be like should of instead of should have. So a lot of times you can be like talking to your friends and stuff and you're like, oh, I should have done my homework or I should have gone shopping or something like that. And it sounds like the word of, but instead it's actually that contraction with the apostrophe VE. Yes?
Does that include times when it's in quotation marks and that's kind of like part of the character that they, like if part of the character is that they speak, you know, like if someone speaks like in conversation.
In the passage?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if it's in quotation marks, does it still have to be grammatically correct?
Yeah, so there are like some like instances like where the passage might not follow like the basic grammar rules. So if that's how they spoke in conversation, then yes, this should have would work. But if you're speaking to someone or if you're writing and it's like a English passage, not a conversation, then should of is never correct. Or like would of, could of. It's always going to be should have. But yeah, that's a good point. Okay. So that's all I had for the English breakdown. Does any of you guys have any questions? No? Okay, well then we will get started on our grammar rules. Okay, so to start off with our grammar rules, we're going to be talking about sentence structure. And so along with that, we will be talking about clauses. So the two types of clauses we're going to talk about are independent and dependent. First we'll talk about independent. So what an independent clause does, or how it works, is it can stand alone in a sentence or as its own sentence. And then it has a subject and a verb. So this is not super important, but sometimes these independent clauses, they also have, or they sometimes have an object. So I'll show you like two examples. Oh, so my first example of an independent clause would be like the sentence, she likes dogs. So it's a super short sentence, but it can stand alone. You don't need to know anything else. It's got the subject and the verb, and then this one has an object. And then another example would be like he can run. It's a complete sentence. It can stand alone. We don't need to add anything to it. But then we've also got our dependent clauses. And so those basically you can say are the opposite. And is that they can't stand alone. recognize dependent clauses or if they like don't really make sense by themselves. So one example would be okay, so this phrase, because they're cute, and you're like, what's cute? Like, who are they? You don't really know what. It doesn't make sense by itself. Or like this one. After school today, you're like, what's after school today? So those are both examples of dependent clauses, and it's that they can't stand alone. So next we are going to talk about conjunctions. And I'm sure you guys have heard of these before. But they connect words. Okay. They connect words, phrases, and clauses. So the main conjunctions that we talk about, you guys have probably heard this acronym, but it's the one fanboys. And so these 7 words are all conjunctions, but they stand for. A is and, N is nor, B is but, O is or, Y is yet, and then S is so. So these are probably mainly the ones you'll see on the ACT, these conjunctions. And so I'll give you an example sentence. Okay, so the toddler wants cake and ice cream at his party. The conjunction and is connecting the toddler wants cake and then ice cream at his party. So those 2 clauses there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about conjunctive adverbs, which I guess you can say are kind of like opposites of conjunctions. And so what they do is they separate 2 clauses. So the acronym that we use to remember the conjunctive adverbs that are used on the ACT is STAMO. I feel like this one is not like as heard of as fanboys. But it's THAMO, and so the T stands for therefore. H is however. A is also. M is moreover. And then O is otherwise. And I forgot to mention, but we'll talk more about these conjunctions, the conjunctive adverbs, and the independent and dependent clauses. We'll talk about those more later on when we get to like the comma and semicolon rules, because those have a big role in them. But that's all we're going to talk about them today. So we're going to be moving on to just like some random rules. So the first deals with adjectives versus adverbs. So adjectives, what they do is they modify nouns. So I could say like big dog, or the a big dog. Or like proud parents, those are big and proud are adjectives that are modifying my nouns. And then if we were to talk about the adverbs, they modify verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. And then a tip with these adverbs is that they usually end in ly. So some examples could be like usually or quickly. But they don't always have to end in ly. So there could be words like never or always. Those are also adverbs. Okay. So the next rule doesn't really have a like heading, but basically the rule is that sentences cannot end with a preposition. And so this just isn't for the ACT, it's like for like all like papers you're writing and stuff. Don't end your sentences in a preposition. If you don't know what a preposition is, they basically show the relationship between two things. Okay, so a preposition shows the relationship between two things, and then down here I just wrote a bunch of examples of some you might recognize on the ACT. So with, to, in, from, within, or onto. There are more, but if you see any of these on the ACT, remember that you can't end a sentence with these prepositions. Okay, so next we're going to talk about subject-verb agreement. And so basically what this means is that the subject and the verb need to agree in your sentence. So I'll give you an example. So if I have this sentence here, the girl goes to school. Because my subject, the girl, is singular, then the verb goes, it will also be in the singular form. If I were to change it, so I would say like the girls, then goes would change to go, which is the plural form that you would use, and it would be the girls go to school. So make sure you have subject-verb agreement on your ACT test. Because if it doesn't have the verb agreement, then the answer's not going to be right. Okay. So next we're going to talk about like sentence simplification when it comes to like breaking down sentences on the ACT and making sure you're choosing the best option. So in regards to like that subject-verb agreement, it can help a lot of times because the ACT tries to trick you with like adding extra words or prepositional phrases. So it can help you to take out those prepositional phrases to make sure you have the correct subject-verb agreement. So often these prepositional phrases aren't important to like the subject or verb. But I'll show you kind of an example of what I mean in this case. so if I had the sentence, okay. So ketchup, one of the best known condiments, were made in the 17th century. So do you guys see like what's wrong with that? Okay, does anyone want to say?
Word.
Yeah, were is not in the correct form. Because ketchup is singular, the verb were should actually be was. So we'll change that to was. And so it could help you if you took out the prepositional phrase, one of the best known condiments. So just read ketchup was made in the 17th century. So like all those extra words in there can kind of like confuse you. And then also another thing that can be confusing is that condiments is plural, so you might think condiments were, but it's instead the subject of the sentence is actually ketchup. So that's why it's important to maybe take out those phrases that aren't adding to the sentence, and that'll help you figure out to have the correct subject-verb agreement. Okay, a few more things with this. So if you see the word and, always think like plural. So if I had an example, salt and pepper, because I'm talking about two things, that's more than one, my verb is going to be are. If I said like salt and pepper is spices, that's not correct, because that would be singular and you need it to be plural because we're talking about two spices. So that's, if you see and, automatically think plural, and then if you see the word or, if you see the word or, whichever word is closer to the verb is gonna like decide if your verb is singular or plural. So I'll show you an example. Okay, so tennis or soccer is her favorite sport. Because we see the word or, our verb is going to be singular because what it's closest to, soccer, is singular. So it would be incorrect if we said tennis or soccer are her favorite sport. I know it may seem like that because we've got two things, tennis and soccer, that we're talking about, but because we're using the word or, our verb is being changed by whatever word it's closest to, which in this case, soccer is singular, so our verb is singular. Okay. Okay, so next we're going to talk about verb tense agreement. So by tenses I mean like past tense, present tense. So when a passage is in one tense, it has to stay in that tense the whole passage. So there can be like other cases where like if you have a passage and then someone has like a flashback, obviously the tenses can change. But usually when a passage like starts, if it starts in present tense, it's gonna stay in present tense. If it starts in past tense, it's gonna stay in past tense throughout the whole entire passage. So make sure like if they give you an answer option and you're like, oh, this one sounds correct, but it's in past tense and the passage was in present tense, it's not gonna be correct. So I can give you an example. Okay, sorry about the marker. It's like drying out. But here's my sentence. The dog ate, slept, and was playing all day. So you guys see what's wrong with that? Yeah, it's because was playing is not in past tense along with ate and slept. So because we started in past tense, we should change this to played. The dog ate, slept, and played all day. Okay. Okay, so there are some weird cases with the words like anybody or somebody, those words, or anyone. And so a phrase to remember, if you should use like a singular or plural noun, is each is one body. So do you guys have the ACT 36 book? Okay, so you don't need to take it out. I just want to make sure you have it. But on page 25 of this book, of the ACT 36 book, it kind of talks about this each is one body phrase some more. So if you have any more questions or you're just confused about it later on in the week, you can go check out that page there. And so I'll explain it. But each is one body. What it means is the word each, or words that end in one or body. So like each, everyone, anyone, somebody, words like that. All of these words, when you see those, think singular. And so that kind of explains the phrase each is one body, because each one and body, the word is singular. So just it helps you remember to keep them singular. But so I'll give you an example. Like if I have a sentence, okay, so each of my cousins loves car racing. So because we have the word each in there, the verb that we're talking about, loves, would be singular. If it were to be, if you didn't have each, you're just saying like my cousins, and then love, it would be love instead of loves. My cousins love car racing. And that's because cousins is plural, but because we have the word each in there, it's making it a singular verb. You have a question?
Yeah, if we changed each to all and then just change loves to love, would that be redundant, or could that work too?
Yeah, so that would work too, because it's not one of those each, everyone, anybody.
Okay.
So then you could use the singular verb. Okay, and then I'll give you another example. Okay, so I'll just, but everyone took his own snacks. Because we have the word everyone, we gotta make sure that it's singular in the sentence. Okay. So we do have like some special circumstances. And so basically with these special circumstances is that the amount of something can stay plural. So if I were to say like a fraction of something like that, and then the pizzas were burned, because I'm talking about like any amount of something, then our verb is going to be plural. Or I could say like, I'll just say this one out loud, but like none of my friends want to go shopping. So because we're talking about like some of your friends, like none of, well I guess it's all, but none of them want, it's going to be wants. This, oh yeah, wants in that sentence. Okay. Let me check the time. Okay, so there's about 10 minutes left. I have a couple more things to talk about. I don't think we'll get to a practice test today, but that's okay because we'll take one next time. So did everyone have this? Okay, sorry. Okay. So we're gonna talk about reflexive pronouns now, and then reflexive pronouns are like those words that end in like self. So like myself, ourself, himself. Those would be our reflexive pronouns. And so with these, the major thing is that they cannot act as a subject in the sentence. So I can give you an example. Along with that, so because they cannot act as a subject, they must have something to reflect back on. So if you feel like this is helpful on the ACT, what you could do is draw an arrow from your reflexive pronoun to what it's reflecting back on. And if it doesn't have anything to reflect back on, then you'll know that it's not correct in that sentence. So I'll give you an example. Okay, so Michelle and myself went shopping. So if I use that little trick, myself, and then I go back to Michelle, okay, but Michelle isn't myself, so that doesn't work. And then also, our other rule, it cannot act as a subject. So if you use myself here, we're saying that it's a subject, and it's not. It can't act as a subject. So what I have to do is change myself to I. And then that fixes it. Michelle and I went shopping. Okay, so the last thing with these reflexive pronouns is that they must agree in gender and number. With the subject. So I could say, okay, so Zach and Kaden sent themselves gifts. So because we have the reflexive pronoun themselves, it is reflecting back to Zach and Kaden, so we know that's correct. And then it also agrees with, not necessarily gender in this case, but number, because there's two of them, so then it's going to be self instead of just self. Okay, do you guys want any more examples of these reflexive pronouns? No, we're good? Okay, then I just have one more thing to talk about today, and that is modifier agreement. So when you're taking a test, you got to make sure you don't have any, like the misplaced modifiers or they're in the wrong spot. Basically make sure that things are lined up in a logical order. So okay, so the modifying phrase should be located next to the noun or verb that's modifying. So I'll give you an example. Okay, I'll give you an example, but okay, I'm sorry about this, marker guys, but the sentence is the dog ate his treats in the light blue collar. So if you just read that sentence straight out, it sounds like the dog's treats are in a light blue collar. But instead, what we were trying to say is that the dog that's wearing the light blue collar ate his treats. So to fix that, you just move things around. So it would be the dog in the light blue collar ate his treats. So the second sentence would be the correct way to write it with our modifier agreement. Okay, so I wanted us to take a practice test today, but the notes took a little bit too long. So that's all I have for you guys today. If you have any questions for me? No? None? Okay. So next time we'll take a practice test and then we'll go over it and then it'll be time. One thing I want to make sure you guys do is do your homework because that'll help you for the actual ACT. And then the last thing I want to mention is that although we might not tell you to like take a practice test in a book, you can always do that on your own because the books are like yours. So use them to your advantage because they could really help you. Alright, so that's all I have for you guys. You guys online can leave if you want to, but thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Have a good